Welcome everyone, I'm Yashni Padiachi and this is Africa Matters. We'll be looking at how Russia's decision to stop exports of wheat, corn and sunflower oil will affect African countries. And the wheels of justice turn in Kenya as a self-proclaimed preacher is acquitted of child trafficking charges. We'll also be catching up with the wave of record-making attempts that's hit Nigeria. Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal this month has once again led to fears of a spike in global food prices. The initiative was brokered by the United Nations and Turkey last July and allowed for the export of Ukrainian foodstuffs. A parallel deal on unhindered Russian food and fertiliser exports was also signed. It brought welcome relief to millions of Africans who had been hard hit by the rising cost of living, record inflation, and the disruption of imports due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine.
This is one of the grain stalls in Mogadishu. Most of the grain sold here are imported from outside the country. Traders have seen increase of basic commodities in the past months. Abshiro Hirsi Suro is a grain retailer based in Mogadishu. She says grain businesses have been poor since the Ukraine war broke out, making businesses hard to sustain.
The current grain is expensive. When we used to sell the Ukrainian grain, it was cheaper. 50 kilogram used to go for $12, but now it's $35. If our farmers get fertilizers and funds, they can produce more grains.
The African Union expressed regret on Tuesday over Russia's decision to suspend deal over safe passage of grain cargo ships from Ukrainian Black Sea ports. Cereal prices in the world's poorest continent have surged because of the slump in exports, sharpening the impact of conflict and climate change.
All these grains you see here come from Ukraine, Ethiopia, and Russia. But now there is ongoing conflict and the grain products are no longer available. We can't produce here in our country too because we don't have sufficient fertilizers and relevant infrastructure.
Humanitarian groups say it will be acutely felt in many parts of Africa, which is heavily reliant on grain from Russia and Ukraine, where millions of people are already facing crisis levels of hunger. Russia have pulled out the grain deal with Ukraine this week. If serious measures will not be taken care of, the basic commodities will skyrocket.
This decision to end the Black Sea Grain Initiative is regrettable. And from where I stand in Eastern Africa, I would say it's very regrettable because in fact, this is going to make our ability to feed hungry people that much more difficult. Already, there are 80 million people in the region who are acutely food insecure. A whole range of factors are driving that. It's conflict, it's climate, it's the economic shocks, and of course it's the hangover from COVID. This suspension of the initiative will just exacerbate what is already a terrible situation.
This arrangement has brought stability to the global food markets and it's lowered food prices for all. But today, Russia has thrown all this progress and all of this hope to the wind. And while Russia plays political games, real people will suffer. The child in the Horn of Africa who is severely malnourished, the mother who will stop producing breast milk for her baby because she doesn't have enough to eat herself. These are the consequences of Russia's actions. This is what it looks like when one country decides to hold humanity hostage. The bottom line is this: the world needs the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and all member states must come together and urge Russia to reverse its decision, resume negotiations, extend, expand, and fully implement this initiative.
The Secretary General will continue to explore all possible avenues to ensure that Ukrainian grain, Russian grain, and Russian fertilizer are out into the global market. That is a determination of his. There are a number of ideas being floated.
But the Kremlin says it halted the deal because parts of it were unmet and it's prepared to supply grain directly to the continent where needed. The issue of food security will be on the table at the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg on the 27th of July. It's the latest in a series of contentious issues that have triggered geopolitical rivalry between Western nations and Russia while pressuring African countries to pick a side. Let's take a closer look. Moscow's involvement in Africa dates back to the Soviet Union era, where it backed socialist movements across the continent. It largely withdrew from the continent after its collapse, but since the mid-2000s, Russia has been expanding military and economic ties with Africa. In March last year, African nations made up nearly half of the countries that abstained or didn't vote on a UN resolution condemning Russia's war in Ukraine, drawing condemnation from the West. A year later, South Africa courted controversy by hosting military exercises with Russia and China in the Indian Ocean during the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine. Western nations accuse Wagner, a private military force, of human rights abuses, stoking tensions about their colonial legacies and spreading anti-UN sentiments, leading to a gradual withdrawal of troops and shutting down of the Blue Helmets missions in June. And in mid-June, African leaders from 7 countries met Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin. They put forward a 10-point proposal calling for a diplomatic solution to the war in Ukraine, but both sides appear to have dismissed the efforts. After months of speculation, South Africa announced on Wednesday that President Putin will not attend the BRICS summit in August. It has been under pressure to arrest Putin and hand him to the International Criminal Court if he did show up. Let's hear more now from Thembisa Fakude. He's a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues and joins me from Johannesburg in South Africa. Thembisa, it's good to have you on this program. Just talk us through how Russia's withdrawal from the grain deal is now going to impact Africa.
Well, it is going to impact Africa like many other countries, by the way. The grain deal did not only impact on Africa, it impacted on other countries. But in terms of food prices, it's going to definitely impact on us, particularly as Africans. And it's not only just grain that is going to impact our business, but we have fertilizers and other essential agricultural products that are going to be impacted as a result of the decision by the Russians to pull out of this very, very important deal for Africa.
So that summit between Russia and African countries is coming up soon. What should African nations be pushing for with Russia when they attend that meeting?
I think, first of all, the African Peace Mission, which is led by the 7 nations, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, should continue. And secondly, I think when the Africans get to St. Petersburg next week for the Africa-Russia Economic Summit, I think they should impress on the leadership in Russia on why they should allow essential grain to leave that part of the world. But we're not quite sure now whether that will be easy, given that President Putin has since decided, other people are saying, pressured by South Africa not to come to attend the BRICS summit physically in August. So that discussion, I think, is going to have some sort of difficulty moving forward. Others are arguing. But hopefully other stakeholders and other African leaders will impress on the Russians why it's important for them to at least allow or extend the grain deal that was achieved by Turkey and the United Nations in the past.
And hopefully Russia will take that on board. But at this point, African countries appear to be caught in a diplomatic dilemma between Western nations and Russia. How can they leverage this, though, and this position? And what risks are there of aligning with either side?
Well, I think Russia at the moment is in desperate need of friends, and Africans are there to support Russia, particularly where it matters at the various multilateral platforms. Africans have voted, some in support of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, others have decided to abstain. So Russia does need Africans, countries, particularly at that multilateral level, and I think they'll use that bargaining chip to force Putin's hand into agreeing to extend the grain deal that has since been cancelled.
And Thembisa, Russian investment, though, when we come to talking money, is less in Africa than that of Western countries. A country like South Africa, the biggest trading partners are America and European nations. Why are African countries at times so loyal to Moscow? And could what we've seen now with the grain deal possibly change the nature of the relationship between Russia and African nations?
It's because of the colonial past. The USSR, not necessarily Russia, the USSR supported most African countries during their liberation struggle. South Africa is one of those countries. So Africans still remember that, and they are reciprocating at the moment, notwithstanding that we see this stark violation of basic human rights and killing and wanton destruction of property in Ukraine. But Africans remain in support of Russia because of the relationship that they've had with the USSR in the past. So this is, reciprocating exactly what the Russians did for Africans. And, many of them are digging in their heels in terms of supporting Russia, notwithstanding, as I've said, the evidence of basic violations of basic human rights and property in Ukraine.
Tembisa Fakude, really good to get your thoughts speaking to us there from Johannesburg. Thank you so much. Nigeria has been struggling to feed its more than 200 million people. It introduced programs before and during Russia's war in Ukraine to grow enough wheat. But the climate crisis and conflicts have hindered those efforts, leading President Tinubu to declare a state of emergency over food price inflation in mid-July. Bushra Gurktash has more.
This one problem, this one local.
No matter where it comes from, it's as precious as gold. Extreme heat is killing wheat on the stalk as Nigeria fights a losing battle for self-sufficiency. An increasingly scarce resource, wheat prices have gone through the roof.
We don't have enough foreign grain supply as the local one. The local one is easily accessible.
Ukraine announced a plan this year to send more wheat to West African nations. But on July 17, Russia withdrew from the deal brokered last year by the UN and Turkey that allowed Ukrainian grain to be shipped through the Black Sea. Local production is trying to keep up with demand, but conditions are making it difficult.
Cost of production, it has increased immensely. So they have to come together and also increase the price of bread by 40% to what it was before.
The government has launched programs to boost domestic grain production. But the climate crisis and conflict in the country's northeast region are driving a food security crisis.
I think the war in Ukraine and Russia will force or compel countries to declare a state of emergency in food, because wheat is the main feedstock for many staple foods across many countries of the world. And you can see what food inflation is globally. You can see the social tension that has been created. You can see the protests, all because of the cost of food.
Nigerian President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency over rising food prices and shortages in July. And without Ukrainian wheat to bridge the gap in supply, most people can only hope that the food shortages will come to an end. Bushra Gurktash, Africa Matters.
We switch gears now and go to Kenya, where a self-proclaimed preacher who mesmerized believers with his extraordinary promise of miracle babies through prayer has been acquitted by a Nairobi court. Dea and his wife were accused of abducting 5 children between 1999 and 2004. They believed prayers alone could bring pregnancy to infertile and postmenopausal women within a miraculously short span of just 4 months, all without the need for physical intimacy. And Masharia reports from the capital, Nairobi.
In a small and packed courtroom in Kenya, an air of anticipation hung thick as hundreds of fervent supporters gathered to witness a pivotal moment in the life of Gilbert Juma Dea. Once a humble stoneman, Dea had risen to prominence as an archbishop, only to face a dark shadow of child trafficking allegations that had haunted him for nearly 2 decades.
The prosecution has not proved their case, in all the counts beyond reasonable doubt, and I acquit the accused person in all the counts.
Their supporters erupted into spontaneous dance.
It has been a long suffering since 2004, and today I'm acquitted on this kind of burden, a yoke on my shoulder, which has been putting me into a dilemma, not working, not making also the headway. It has been so sad that I've been labeled as a child stealer. Some people say I'm a child trafficker. And I want to thank God for the British government who gave me protection for 12 years. And they said I have no case to answer.
In a place where Dea's jubilance resonates throughout the streets, whispers of discontent reverberate among those who believe Kenya's court system has failed them. Deep-rooted issues such as child trafficking and abuse plague the nation, leaving scars that may never fully heal. Among the countless victims, 16-year-old Auma's story stands as a haunting reminder of the atrocities committed in the name of false promises. Seduced by dreams of a brighter future in Nairobi, she eagerly embarked on a journey that would instead lead to abandonment and despair.
What made me run away from my parents' home is my mom told me to get married when I was 14 years old. I said I couldn't because I was still in school. She told me to find an older man to give me a dowry. I said I was still too young. How could I find an older man when I'm still young? She dismissed me and I went to my father, but my father took her side.
As Auma bravely strives to heal her wounds, a chorus of voices rises from the tireless warriors combating child abuse.
Not all the judges are quite acquainted with the Counter-Trafficking Act of 2010, which gives them the guidelines on how to process and manage cases of human trafficking.
Despite progress made, the lingering scars of the past remind victims that there is still work to be done within Kenya's court system.
After about 2 decades, the gavel falls on a landmark child trafficking trial in Kenya, bringing an end to a case that has tested the limits of time and international law.
Staying in court, the parents of nearly 70 Gambian children who died after consuming cough syrups made in India have taken their government to court, accusing them of mishandling drug imports. They're also seeking about $250,000 in compensation for each child. The country doesn't have a medicines testing lab yet. Maimun Abbas spoke to some of the parents outside court in the capital, Banjul.
The families of the more than 66 children who died from the acute kidney injury linked to a contaminated cough syrup imported from India have filed a lawsuit with the Gambia Bar Association against the medical regulatory. Even though the government says it investigated the matter, the victims' parents say central authorities haven't done enough.
I expect justice. And as far as the court has begun today, I really expect justice. And justice is, when I say justice, I mean justice for the innocent child that has gone, including my own child. And for it not to happen in this country anymore. We don't want it to happen anymore. And we want the government to take responsibility of what happened.
Court documents show the parents are also suing Indian drug maker Median Pharmaceuticals, accusing them of lax regulations. But the Indian government says its own tests showed the syrups were safe. Gambian authorities withdrew the syrup from pharmacy shelves when the incident happened last year, sending them to Ghana and Switzerland for further tests. The incident highlighted the need of proper regulation and testing the pharmaceutical industry.
Our children's safety must be our top priority, and we cannot tolerate unregulated medication entering our country. We need stringent regulations and thorough testing to ensure the medications our children receive are safe. We can't bring back our lost children, but we must work together to prevent such a heartbreaking situation from ever happening again.
The government says it has secured World Bank funding to build a medicine testing lab and are in the process of laying the groundwork before constructions can begin. Families of those who lost their children are now pushing for accountability because almost 1 year on, no one in the Gambia or India has been penalized for the death.
We are determined to pursue justice and ensure that such a devastating tragedy doesn't happen again. Although we cannot undo the loss of the children, we strongly emphasize the need for this matter to be treated with the utmost seriousness.
And the parents hope that they will finally get justice, no matter how long it takes.
We head back to Nigeria now, where a wave of record-breaking attempts has captivated the nation, with individuals pushing their limits to achieve extraordinary feats. Ilyas Avci reports on the recordathon.
This is Oluwatobi Kufeji, a gospel singer based in Lagos. He recently completed a marathon singing session that lasted more than 200 hours. The 39-year-old started the vocal marathon on July 3rd. With only 2 hours of rest every 24 hours, he hopes this record-breaking performance will boost his music career.
Music labels now, they're waiting for me to complete this, and hopefully by God's grace there will be a meaningful deal that will give my music a major boost that I've been craving for.
Meanwhile, another Nigerian, Joy Chakwuri, had her sights set on breaking the current record for the longest full-body massage of 25 hours and 4 minutes. She clocked up an impressive 50 hours, a feat that she believes is enough to secure a spot in the record books.
My initial plan was to do 75 hours massage on different individuals, but I had to stop at 50 hours because my body was exhausted. And then since it's a new record, I will be uploading, and so I will submit the 50 hours video, the one I did last, to Guinness, and wait for the approval.
But Joy, like many others, were inspired by the recent success of Chef Hilda Bassi, who completed the longest ever cooking session by an individual. Her incredible cookathon captured the nation's attention, with politicians and celebrities rallying behind her. While some are growing wary of the trend, others view it as an opportunity for professionals to gain recognition.
It's a great thing, and it will improve, and it will, motivate people to believe in themselves. But there are some things that you can do, but you are looking for an avenue to just showcase your talent.
Now, these record-breaking attempts in Nigeria are not only pushing the boundaries of human endurance, but also inspiring the others to aim for greatness. Ilyas Avci, Africa Matters.
This week, we head to southern Africa to explore Mokhotlong, a city in northeast Lesotho. The highland city is home to the world's highest diamond mine, which is known for its particularly massive diamonds. Let's take a closer look. And that's our show this week. Please do share your thoughts about the stories you've seen or ideas on what you'd like us to cover. On Twitter, you can use the hashtag Africa Matters. You can also watch this episode and more on YouTube. Just search for Africa Matters, TRT World, like, comment, and share. I'll see you again next week.